Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. This is Boris Singhausen with you. Today is May 6th, and we have a lot of very interesting news. Drones of the armed forces of Ukraine halted the operation of as many as 13 Russian airports last night. Dozens of drones reached the Moscow region without any obstacles. Parades in Russian cities for May 9th are being cancelled, and the Immortal Regiment will be online. And the Third World War is inevitable. Survey results in Europe. As of today, there is only one way to avoid it. About this method in today's episode, and the United Kingdom is already starting to prepare for war with Russia. About this and more in today's episode. If you are new to this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming episodes. And let's get into it. So, drones of the armed forces of Ukraine have halted operations at as many as 13 Russian airports: Vnukovo, Domodedovo, Zhukovsky, Sheremetyevo, Kaluga, Volgograd, Saratov, Samara, Ivanovo, Nizhny Novgorod, and Yaroslavl, also Kazan and Nizhnekamsk. Not only that, but Putin has recently started to look very much like Gollum from the Lord of the Rings. With this parade, my precious. That is, he is building some unimaginable air defense systems around this parade, pulling air defense systems from all over Russia. He is determined to hold this parade at any cost, because only this parade will show that the king is not actually naked, or at least that's what Putin thinks. I think he just clicks his heels every time he gets information about a leader refusing to attend this parade. And there have already been refusals. And Ukraine has shown that the plan is a cover-up, including before the parade, when guests start arriving, during the parade and after the parade. It's a cover-up plan. When airports are closed and planes are redirected somewhere very, very far away, making it uncomfortable for those who came to visit Putin, this plan can be permanent, just constant. And since only Kim Jong-un travels to Putin by armored train, while the others fly by plane, naturally this creates a very, very unpleasant situation, although Putin claims that everything is actually under control. Don't worry, I have everything under control. In reality, it's not like that. As many as 20 drones reached the Moscow region, Sobyanin reported. But let's imagine that they usually understate the number. That is, Moscow and the Moscow region are fully within reach. And this is just, like when there was a rehearsal for Putin's parade, when the Chinese, what a state we've reached, Chinese military personnel marching in formation during parade rehearsals. So here, the Ukrainian armed forces also had a rehearsal. That is that, as they say, we can repeat, you can play together. I would also like to remind that everyone who visits Putin does so at their own risk. They have all been warned. And now in their monitoring, and believe me, they have it, they are monitoring the situation, including first and foremost the security situation. They are reading the following information: that Ukraine has intensified attacks on Moscow and the Moscow region ahead of the May 9th parade. And for the second night in a row, such attacks continue. Moreover, local authorities report that the Bash attack on Tuesday was the largest in 2 months. Can you imagine that? And in addition, several regions were subjected to an air attack during the night, this very night, on military airfields from which planes take off during Victory Day parades. That's how it happens. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and let's move on. This is unheard of. This is unheard of. I reject such threats. Guess who is so brave here? Who is this brave one? It's Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia. He was very upset that Ukraine cannot guarantee his security. But still, he most likely decided to go. You see, what's the story here? Inform. Napalm reports, citing its sources in the intelligence services, that the FSB is preparing to carry out terrorist attacks in Russian regions on May 9th. And maybe not only in the regions, that they are capable of this, the whole world knows. We have repeatedly talked about the Ryazan sugar. In general, they know how to do this, destroy their own people, blow up houses, the metro. As has happened before, they know how to do this. Therefore, Fico accused Zelensky of disrespect, and naturally he is hysterical that no one can ensure any security for him. And you know what else is interesting? That this Fico said the following, that it was Russia that made the greatest contribution to the victory over fascism. Now we will return to that story. Why Fico should be more hysterical about FSB terrorist attacks rather than about something falling from above. But we will take advantage of the moment, and remind the self-taught historian Fico on the eve of the parade he is planning to attend, the true story of who made the greatest contribution to the victory over Nazi Germany. So, well, naturally, the main blow from the Soviet republics was borne by Ukraine. Between 8 to 10 million are the total losses of Ukraine in World War II. 40% of the material losses of the entire USSR, of all the republics in World War II, were the losses of Ukraine. Ukraine suffered the greatest losses among all the republics of the Soviet Union. The war, I remind you, World War II swept through Ukraine twice because the Wehrmacht first advanced and then retreated, and 10 million Ukrainians were left without a roof over their heads. Almost 50%, nearly half of all housing stock was destroyed. In the villages, almost 2 million houses. So there you have it, who suffered. 700 destroyed cities, and half of the entire Wehrmacht and USSR forces fought on the territory of Ukraine. Therefore, unlike Russia, the territory of Ukraine was completely occupied by fascists for several years. And after these numbers and facts, the phrase from Putin's supporters, "we can do it again," sounds completely different. Isn't that true? Now it becomes completely obvious whose path they want to repeat, but of course they cannot. But they tried. I remind you that, in general, I understand that the great 1.5 meter historian bites everyone upon meeting. They then start spouting some kind of historical nonsense. Distorted electoral history is Putin's forte. He mixes it with some conspiracy theories, blends it with the greatness of Russia, the titularity of the nation. We could never be defeated, and weaves religion into it. And it turns into a splendid okroshka which can be poured directly into the heads of Russians instead of brains. And judging by Fico's statements, not only to Russians, by the way, Donald Trump recently made a notable statement as well. He claimed that Americans and Russians won World War II. And today, he even wrote that it was the United States that won World War II. The contribution it's important to understand that the contribution of the United States was indeed very significant, very important. But again, where one claims victories for themselves, then another. By the way, regarding what Fico is broadcasting, Slovakia participated in World War II on the side of Germany. I think that's no secret, and fought on the territory of present-day Ukraine until the Nazis liquidated the legal status of their puppet government. Now, regarding the terrorist attack that the FSB might be preparing, we will move on to this terrorist attack now. In the meantime, now there is very important, since Putin, as I understand, is not really planning to cease fire, and in general it seems he has no inclination towards a truce where others have a soul. He has some kind of black void. Therefore, our warriors now, given that the support from partners, frankly speaking, is not what it used to be, but we are grateful to everyone. Therefore, our warriors need our help, and we are conducting a large collection for the Legion of Freedom of Russia, for the units of UAV operators and reconnaissance UAV operators. Therefore, if you have the opportunity, please support. They need this help now, more than ever, and it is crucial. The link to the collection is right here below, in the description of this video and in the comment to this video. If you are not watching on my channel, here is a QR code, and by using this QR code, you can go directly to the Legion's bank. And for that, a huge thank you, always, both from me personally and from the units for which we are closing these collections. And there is also PayPal for those who want and can help from abroad, for which a huge thank you So, about this terrorist attack, why should Fico be more concerned about this rather than something falling on his head? Although that also needs to be worried about. To dispose of one of the foreign guests using their capabilities from the FSB side and naturally blame it all on Ukraine, this is quite possible. Russians have tried to pull off even more than that. Even from this point of view, if I were in Fico's place, I would think 100 times before going of all the guests. He seems to me the least valuable. And with him, or rather with the consequences that will follow, various incidents that might happen to him, there will be the least problems. And there is a feeling that Vucic has put this puzzle together, suddenly got wiser, and suddenly fell ill. But we'll see. Maybe he's just trying to increase his value, as I mentioned way in the previous episode, like saying, beg me, I'm so sick and miserable, but I'll come anyway. Old man Kabayev might even shed a tear when he sees me so sick and miserable. That is, he might just, so to speak, say, I'm very, very sick. I'll just drop by for half an hour and adieu, goodbye. Recently, someone from the obsessed Crimeans, by the way, wrote to me in the comments about the parade. Like traitor, Tizengausen, Ukronazi. The parade will happen anyway. Well, let's read. In Sevastopol this year, there will be no parade on May 9th, and naturally, for security reasons, the occupation authorities state. Well, I remind you, the last parade there was in 2022, the first year of the full-scale war. They were still standing tall, drones hadn't flown there yet, no ATACMS, no Neptunes. The Black Sea Fleet was still in the base and at the main base in Sevastopol. The Black Sea Fleet headquarters was still standing there on the hill, whole and unharmed. Only later will missiles hit it, and this reminder will remain. In general, there will be no parade. This Gauleiter Razvozayev added at the staff meeting that the Immortal Regiment event will take place online. By the way, they came up with the online format brilliantly. By the way, for those who wanted to hold the Immortal Regiment in Kazakhstan, for example, they were also told, do you want to march with portraits? Do you with these St. George ribbons, or wrap yourselves in tricolors? Just sit there and send emojis online. So that's how it is. Who was shouting from Sevastopol, there will be a parade, we will hold it anyway. There will be no parade, but I will now move on to why it would actually be good if there was one. And listen, Putin truly has one great talent. He turns the territories he sets out to liberate, in quotes, into some kind of depressive camps with crazed biomasses that just sway there. Yes, there are reasonable people, but might say they are in the minority, and B, they are forbidden to speak. So, by the way, how are the residents of Donbass who called for Putin? I wonder how they are living. Maybe there are those here who have changed their minds, who called for Putin. Putin, come. They called, yes, if we are talking specifically about Putin. Do you feel liberated? Liberated from a normal life, from housing, from a peaceful sky overhead? Do you see how the bald dove of peace is spreading peace over these territories for you? And to the Crimeans, by the way, who burned their Ukrainian passports, the same question. How are you doing there? Did you breathe a sigh of relief? Did you feel the brown magic of Putin on yourselves? He waved his wand, and suddenly the sirens in Crimea started blaring, and drones and missiles appeared, and fences by the sea, and what else? Ugly high-rise buildings. In other words, nothing for you, nothing is too precious for Putin. You know, when I still lived in Sevastopol, I always avoided those crazy old ladies on Primorsky Boulevard at the Shell. Well, those from Sevastopol know. The Shell means there's a stage there, shaped like a shell, with stands in front of it. And old ladies would gather there. They would periodically, on any holiday related to Russia, wrap themselves in tricolors and shout, Putin. You've probably seen that Putin, president of the world, when the lady from the underworld screams. There were many like that there. They would line up in some kind of wedge formation and get excited to Russian songs. Right now, they are definitely happy. They are happy because they watch TV and the TV tells them so. Well, in general, this year they won't be holding the parade in Krasnodar either. By the way, out of curiosity, I watched a video of the 2010 parade. I highly recommend it to the Z Patriots for viewing. Can you imagine, under the British flag, British servicemen are marching on Red Square under the American flag? US servicemen, Polish soldiers are marching there. And just hold on now, hold on. Or sit down if you're not sitting. And the armed forces of Ukraine are marching under the Ukrainian flag. Can you imagine? And then later on, the modern day Hitler decides to attack Ukraine and everyone becomes enemies except for dictators and autocrats. Can you imagine how it all turned out like this? And instead of those who took the first blow and those who truly helped defeat Hitler, I'm talking about Lend-Lease and the Second Front. In their place, there will be boxes of Chinese and North Korean military, maybe from Iran as well. This time, of course, the Taliban won't be marching on Red Square, but at this rate soon there will be mixed formations of warriors from Burkina Faso, Russians, and Taliban fighters. And now I'm getting to the point where you might think we're just sitting here as evil Ukro-Saxons who don't want the parade to happen. No, we want the events dedicated to the memory of those who died in World War II to still take place. That's it. But firstly, Putin's Russia, which tried to repeat, in quotes, the feat of Hitler, in my opinion, has forever lost the right to consider itself among the victors of World War II. To those whose flags were once thrown on Red Square after World War II, yes, you can associate yourselves with them. Secondly, commemorative events should be held according to true history. Everyone who fought against Nazi Germany should participate. Indeed, we must not forget that it was not the Great Patriotic War, but World War II, which did not start in 1941, but began when both Hitler and Stalin quickly decided to divide Poland under the cover of noise, but then one betrayed the other. We need to remember everything. By the way, I recently saw Simonian saying with a straight face that the territories that used to be Ukraine will be divided, just like Poland was once divided. Aren't they the heirs of the Führer, huh? And by the way, yes, to those who periodically write with malice, I've noticed that Putin's followers are like, well, just a vial of malice, you know? They just hate everyone. Well, it's understandable, life is like that. They can't express hatred towards the one who provided them with such a life. But here, it's allowed. Therefore, I inform you that I learned Russian better than most of Putin's admirers, specifically to cause them pain in a language they understand. And how can we not remember the second great geostrategist? About Lukashenko. Lukashenko and Putin, I think, are together until the grave. Lupa and Pupa brothers until the grave. Living together is the only way left. Everything works out. Lukashenko just won't calm down. And Russia and Belarus are ready to launch a joint project to produce drones and start building a factory on Belarusian territory. Putin announced this recently. And as for the potato dough Führer, he's just missing a drone factory. He has regulated his market in Belarus to such an extent that Belarusians can't find decent potatoes in stores. People from Belarus write to me, can you imagine, Boris, it's funny, of course, but in Belarus, we're chasing after decent potatoes and cabbage is being imported from Kazakhstan. Yes, another great agro-Führer has managed things, but he will build drones with Putin, produce them directly, and bring 150,000 Pakistanis to Belarus. And he will also conduct joint exercises with Putin. But this time, I have a feeling, if he even flinches, if there is a sense that he is ready to repeat some mischief again with the Russian military. Where there are Russian military forces, there is mischief. So these are two inseparable moments. Therefore, it will come to him swiftly, very swiftly. No matter how much you run around with Kolya, with a Kalashnikov without a magazine, with a Spitz under your arm, it will hit right where it needs to. Well, instead of developing good neighborly relations, all the neighbors around Lukashenko are building fences and stretching barbed wire along the border. And soon they will mine the entire border. So this is instead of properly developing their country, sure, going on camera to tear off some plywood in a barn and scold a local official is one thing. You've ruined the country. After 30 years of Lukashenko's rule, you can't find potatoes in Belarus. But Putin will be rushing to churn out drones. But there is a feeling that Belarus, known for its partisan movement, will quickly show him that there can be no Russian factories for drone production. And I've mentioned this before, but it's been a while. I have many acquaintances from Belarus, and one of my journalist acquaintances conducted a closed, unofficial, secret, you could even say, survey of Belarusian military personnel who agreed to answer his questions. And he asked them the question, are you ready to go to war against Ukraine? And 2 out of 3 said absolutely not. So he understands this, Lukashenko. That's how it is. In the USA and Western Europe, they consider a third world war inevitable. We will now move on to this news. In the meantime, a test of attentiveness for you friends. Right now, half of you are watching this video. Not on my official channel, but it's very easy to determine. Right here, below is the channel name. Mine is called Boris Tysenhausen. That's why many channels post this video on their own. Therefore, I recommend you subscribe to the official channel. Moreover, it will only take you a few seconds. In the YouTube search, type Boris Tysenhausen and my channel will appear like this. Here on a dark background, it might be white for you, and there's a subscribe button. You click it. That's it. You are on the official channel, and the comments you write, I will definitely see them. So let's move on to this news. Many Americans and Western Europeans believe that a third world war could start within a decade, with the most likely cause being tensions in relations with Russia. Wow, what a revelation. The Guardian writes about this. They conducted a survey, and the French are the most likely to believe in the start of a new large-scale war in the next 5 to 10 years. 55%, Spain, 50, Italy, 46, the British, 41, Germany, 41, the USA, 45. That is almost half of the population believes that Russia will soon start and be the source of this third world war. The majority, from 70 to 76%, expect that any new conflict will involve the use of nuclear weapons. Well, if we're talking about a third world war, then yes. And on this same topic, the United Kingdom, not waiting, is starting to prepare for an attack from Russia, preparing for war with Russia. The UK authorities have begun developing an updated version of the war contingency plan, which, I remind you, was last revised back in 2005. Well, what were they sitting and waiting for? Russia in 2008, Georgia, then 2014, the annexation of Crimea, the occupation of Donbass. Now there's a full-scale war. What were they sitting and waiting for? That Putin would say, I was joking, or this isn't real. Well, in general, says friends, I think that for Putin, this very nuclear war would be a disaster. But not because he would have to make a choice. He will never press that button. He loves life so much, clinging to it with his twisted blue-black fingers. He loves life. He loves power. When he said we would go straight to heaven, ha ha ha. No, friends. Those who go straight to heaven don't dig bunkers for themselves. A bunker is a bit in the other direction, although I assure you, Putin definitely won't be accepted in hell. He already needs to find a new place somewhere here. Where can this scoundrel be placed after death? So, for him, it would be a disaster because the whole world might find out the state of his nuclear arsenal. Billions, I remind you, billions of dollars are spent by nuclear states on the maintenance and storage of nuclear arsenals. And the fact that everything in Russia, upon closer inspection, turns out to be, to put it mildly, not what it claims to be, is clear to everyone. What do we have there? The second army in the world, this unique hazelnut in the Russian tablet, the Russian car, Russian aviation industry, well, basically everything. And what is the state of Putin's nuclear arsenal? And how much money was allocated and how much was stolen? Does anyone know the answer to this question? But at least I know the answer to another question: how to avoid World War III. If indeed many believe that World War III could start, why live in fear? Why wait? Give Ukraine, those who are very afraid, give Ukraine all your long-range weapons, and Ukraine will dismantle the bald moth to atoms. Ukraine will simply do it. Moreover, by the way, many European citizens do not believe that their army can protect them. Can you imagine? The Germans believe this the least, only 16%. Well, the French have the most faith in their army, 44%. In the USA, the figure is significantly higher, 71%, well, because there hasn't been a war yet where the USA fought directly on its own territory. Well, they believe, meaning this image was created. Although, of course, the United States spends a huge amount of money on the defense budget, on new military developments. But I will emphasize once again, Putin also showed everyone cartoons of how his cosmic, super ballistic, megasonic missiles fly around the Earth 100 times and destroy everyone. We have seen all of this, and he talked about his invincible army on the Zvezda channel. Recently I mentioned, yes, that the Zvezda facility was somewhat hit by Ukrainian drones. So we have heard all of this, but it turned out that maybe this is the third world war. So why wait? Why? Especially if you don't believe in your own armies. Well, how is that acceptable? The Germans, 16%. Where to? Give the weapons to those who can protect you, and have been doing so for a long time, by the way. The armed forces of Ukraine, which are essentially the only stronghold between this swampy mess and Europe, which, well, indeed has its own problems there. But a war that could come to European countries is a completely different level of problem. And a few cents increase in gasoline prices will seem like a minor issue. In other words, Ukraine has been living with this war for a very long time. So give weapons to Ukraine so that it can end this war, or at least force that nasty troll to sit at the negotiating table to show, and out of fear even sign something, fearing that he might get hit on the head and his cabin blown up somewhere on Red Square. That would be sensible. But you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and support the cause if possible. By the way, check if you are on the official channel or not. Have a peaceful day, everyone, and of course, glory to Ukraine.